Out of the roughly 370 videos I've produced thus far on this channel, I think I can count on one hand how many I've done focused on manual grinders. And to some of you, that statistic may not be all that surprising, but just to be completely honest, they really aren't my thing. I mean, considering how involved the coffee brewing process can be, I would really rather focus my attention somewhere else. But from time to time, a hand grinder comes along that piques my interest, and the CafeSing Orca is one of those grinders. Of course, on the surface, it appears to be much like many other hand grinders on the market, but inside its choice of grinding gear is pretty uncommon, if not incredibly rare. So today we're digging into the Orca and looking at its overall layout and build, its performance and usability, and of course its quirks and downsides. But first, in the spirit of full disclosure, the folks at CafeSing were kind enough to send me the Orca to review after I noticed it online and reached out personally. Of course, regardless of that, they agreed to my terms of no access to my draft or the content of this review prior to its public release. But with all that out of the way, let's dive into it. For me, the big draw of the Orca is the things that sort of set it apart from the norms of hand grinders or the mass majority of options on the market. But when you look at it, what you see on the surface, or a lot of what you see, is relatively standard. Of course, it's got that unmistakable hand grinder silhouette, a cylindrical body, and a curved handle. But there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. Build-wise, the entire unit is made of a nicely machined and finished metal, which gives it a good heft. Up top, there's a pretty standard detachable hand crank with a smoothly finished and shaped wood knob that lends to the Orca's overall premium feeling exterior. Also on the outside is a stepped grind adjustment that gives you very fine control at a respectable 18 microns per click, which in a more recognizable measurement equals to 0.018 millimeters per click. Also on the inside, it features a steel drive shaft and some buttery smooth bearings. And all of this leads to what I consider the star of the show, the 49mm flat burrs. And not just one set, but two, both with significantly contrasting designs and geometry, focused on different brewing methods and flavor profiles. The main set is a pretty recognizable bimodal burr, aimed at producing grinds with more fines that result in higher balance and complexity in both filter and finer applications like espresso. And the other set is what's known as ghost burrs, which is a design that's slowly becoming more common, and instead of blades, they have a series of diamond-shaped teeth that break down the coffee. By design, the ghost burrs are significantly coarser than the bimodal set, but create a very even particle distribution with less fines, which results in an increased clarity and brightness in the cup. At this point, I don't think there's a whole lot of mystery or surprises with how a hand grinder is engineered or operates, but when it comes to the CafeSing Orca, there was one big unknown when it comes to its flat burr design, and that is grinding difficulty. For instance, most hand grinders, even the Orca's little brother the Grizz, utilize conical burrs, which are generally spun at lower RPMs, as well as more efficient for hand grinding because they do more crushing than cutting. They also allow for a straight-through design, a very simple path for the beans in and grinds out, as opposed to flats that push beans and grinds outwards using centrifugal force. So as soon as the Orca landed, I immediately threw some coffee into it, and much to my surprise, it isn't all that different in terms of the force needed to grind. In fact, the main noticeable difference is the sensation and sound of the grinding is more of a vibration, compared to the typical hand grinder crunchiness. And even though the centrifugal force isn't anywhere near as fast as an electric grinder, the tendency to use an angled grip for additional control and torque means the beans are consistently fed into and out of the burrs. This in turn also leads to very low retention, with most of my batches being 0.1 grams or so on average without a whole lot of barista intervention. Also, as I've already mentioned, the Orca comes with two sets of flats, a bimodal and a ghost burr, which can be swapped without tools or a whole lot of effort, and getting into them is pretty similar to other hand grinders. The burrs themselves come pre-installed onto their own carriers, and rather smartly, the bottom burr, which is the one that spins, also comes with a pre-breaker that helps get the beans through the relatively tight entrance to the grind chamber. But now that we've essentially covered the entire grinder and the journey of the beans from top to bottom, let's get into brewing. Personally, I found the bimodal burrs to be great for espresso, though they are capable of grinding for any method, but because they produce a good amount of fines, the espresso is nicely textured and full-bodied, with a pleasant balance. Generally, I'd say the cup quality from taste to extraction is on par with most mid to high level prosumer electric grinders, meaning it's capable across all roast levels, flavor profiles, and espresso styles. The Ghost pair, on the other hand, is more filter focused, essentially ranging from your standard traditional AeroPress all the way to a French press or cold brew. And because these burrs produce less fines, it's great for immersion brewing or faster drippers like the Orca, because the extraction is very even, and it reduces, if not eliminates, any potential bitterness or sourness that comes from a mix of brewing a lot of boulders and fines together. But generally, I really enjoyed my pour-overs with these burrs, as the faster, even flow of water through the grinds produced not only well-extracted cups, but also very clean and bright flavors. As always, every piece of gear has its own issues, and the Orca has some relating to its design, and others that are just relatively common across the entire grinder market. For one, even though the ability to take it apart and put it back together by hand is nice, the sheer fact that it's built in 3 pieces means there's a lot of threads and twisting, and they can be a bit of a pain to align, as well as tighten or loosen without breaking loose one section or over-tightening another. Also, I think this is a common issue across a lot of grinders, whether they're electric or hand, but I've had some difficulty and issues both zeroing and re-zeroing after swapping burrs. I mean, at least with electric grinders, it's a 10-second fix to regrind your coffee, but with a hand grinder, it's a little more labor and time intensive. Personally, I'd love to see a more consistent zeroing process so I can return to my original click after the swap, so I'm not having to crank out a whole new batch of coffee or two to dial in. And last but certainly not least, an issue common to many hand grinders and single dosing grinders, the dosing cup or grinds catch or whatever you want to call it, is a bit on the sticky side. I mean, more often than not, I tend to find a gram or two stuck to the inside corners and sides of the cup that need to be brushed or knocked out. So for what it's worth, considering I've used only a handful of hand grinders to begin with, I will say that the CafeSing Orca has to be my favorite of the very limited amount I've used thus far. And really, the biggest draw for me is the burr choices and their specific capabilities. I mean, being able to produce that dense, full-bodied espresso I love, coupled with the Ghost burr's ability to brew clean, crisp filter coffee, it really feels like it's got the best of both worlds. And if they could just design a conical burr set for the Orca, it would truly be in the running for the ultimate hand grinder. And its quirks and downsides to me really aren't much to complain about, considering its overall sturdy materials, thoughtfully designed internals, and the general performance of the grinder itself. Of course, coming in at $240, it's not what I would call cheap or inexpensive, but considering its features, an additional set of burrs, external adjustment ring, and 18 micron per click, it definitely falls into the less expensive realm for the premium category of hand grinders. And with that, I think it's time I start wrapping this one up, and as always, pass the conversation on to you. What are your thoughts on the CafeSing Orca, and what are your thoughts on flat burr hand grinders? Have you used this one or a different one? And if so, what'd you think? Drop your answers to those questions and any others you may have in the comment section down below. And as always, I'll see y'all next week. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit that little bell button for notifications of new videos posted every Friday. Check out my Instagram @Sprometheus for content throughout the week. Help support the channel by considering becoming a member for exclusive access. And as always, stay caffeinated. Pony Boy.